Hello, everyone, and welcome to Apex Magazine's Snap Judgment. Number 6? Is this number 6? Really? Oh my goodness. Welcome to Snap Judgment number 6. We're so glad that you were able to tune in. And if you are not tuning in live, but you are tuning in after the fact, you are also still welcome here. This is how the show works. Our subscribers and Patreon patrons for Apex Magazine have submitted some first pages of their genre short stories or novels, or in some cases, I think there's a novelette or a novella up in here. It's a whole mixed bag. The first pages include the first 250 words of whatever the story is. I will be reading the submissions out loud, and if at any point our editors, our panel of judges here, feels that they would stop reading and reject the piece from the slush pile, they will raise their hand, and once all three hands are in the air, or I've reached the end of the excerpt, then we will stop and discuss why. The judges' critiques are really meant to help you get new ideas, hone your craft, observe actively new things about other people's writing, or perhaps your own if you are one of the submitters. But we hope that this whole process will help you sort of integrate into your own process what the editors might actually be looking for, so that it's less of a guessing game the next time you submit something. We do receive more stories than we can possibly do in this 90-minute stream. So your entries have been randomized, and we will go in the order that fate has set for us today. So we apologize in advance if we don't get to your work, and we thank all of those who we do get to today, and we apologize also in advance for getting to your work. My name is Aly Grauer. I am your host for today, and I'm very happy to be back here hosting Snap Judgment. This is, I think, my third or fourth Snap Judgment. I've lost track because they are all so much fun and they all blur together, and I'm so excited to be back again with our panel of judges. I will now introduce our panel of editing judges. Please welcome, known by some as the Drabble King, Kai Delmas is an Apex Magazine slush reader and an author of many, many short stories. Kai, welcome.
Thank you.
We also have our co-editor-in-chief of Apex Magazine, Lesley Conner, also the author of the alternate history extreme horror novel, The Weight of Chains. Welcome, Lesley. Good morning.
Hi.
And last but certainly not least is the man with the titanium jaw, co-editor-in-chief of Apex Magazine and owner of Apex Publications, Jason Sizemore.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going great. Are you all ready to get started?
Yeah.
Yep.
I think we're all really eager to dive into this. I am so excited to read these out loud because there are some really fascinating pieces in the mix today. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And again, we are going to try to get through as many as we possibly can, but forgive us because we love a good conversation. So here we go. Starting off with our first entry. This is a sci-fi short story entitled Chasing Indigo. We, the farmers, descend upon the barren slopes in silence, picking with vibrating tools, removing the smooth black rocks by hand, pissing where we stand. This composition of sand and slate is kind to neither the germination process nor human skin. The hailing black stones leach something into the earth. We don't know exactly what, but it burns. The ground rumbles, ego riding in. Only a handful remain with functioning roamers in Halicent. Even so, Ego regularly arrives late. On skinny legs, he slinks off his roamer and begins hacking the ground. After a time, he reaches the north end of the crop line, some 50 feet down the gold slope. Beside me, the low-pitched hum of his roamer is seductive. I place a foot into the corrugated plastic floor suspended 2 feet above the ground. The fuel gauge is cautiously low. Curiously low. Before I look closer, the biometric grips flash red and the engine dies. I fall back into work. A radio crackle creeps up behind me. No need to look around. Every conversation with Ego is colored by the stubborn static of his handheld radio. You're moving slow today, he says, unlike you. Old bones. You'll be the same in a couple years. Ego waggles his wrapped hand. Won't have any bones left by then. I laugh and scoop out more stones. My fingers catch on something curved and narrow. I tug on it. The rib cage springs from the earth as though it has reanimated. Okay, so we made it through our first entry. Huzzah. No one raised their hands. I didn't see anybody flinch or anything either. And I know that we were all actively reading and listening. And I apologize for stumbling over some words. I will wake up, I swear. Do we want to start with Lesley, perhaps?
Sure. I love the title. Like that's sometimes titles are important because that's the first thing that the editors or the Slush readers are seeing, because I know many of us don't read cover letters until after we've read a submission. So they are really important. And I thought that this was a really great title. I thought that it feels different and it left me intrigued. Like it's not a title I've seen a whole lot. I enjoyed that first sentence. It is jam-packed with information. Because it's telling you who we are, where they are, what they're doing. You've got the pissing where we stand, which is definitely a different detail that, most people when they're working, they don't just piss where they're standing. Like we all usually go to a bathroom or somewhere else. So that is like a curious detail that left me like, it really sets the setting for where we are really well. I thought that all of the information, because this is a sci-fi story, and sometimes within sci-fi, like you've got a lot of little world building that you've got to do that, one, keeps your readers engaged, because if you start bogging it down with too much information, it can lose readers' attention. And I felt did a really good job of giving us a ton of information while keeping our attention. So I really enjoyed this one. I would definitely, as soon as you say rib cage is popping out of the ground, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to keep reading. So I like this one.
Absolutely. Jason?
Yeah, I found this to be an effective opening 250. I wasn't completely blown away, but I did like most of the language that was used. I do think there were times it got a little heavy on the exertion of description, but I do like some of the like possible foreshadowing going on. The fuel gauge is curiously low. That made me raise my eyebrow now. The image of the rib springing out of the ground, very well done. The opening paragraph is pretty strong. I think I would elaborate a little bit on pissing where we stand, just so that you could have like a genre marker perhaps in that opening paragraph. Maybe they're pissing where they stand because they're in a suit, some kind of suit or space suit, whatever. But yeah, I certainly would continue reading.
Awesome. Kai?
I was told to just say everything what Jason said is correct, so I'm going to go with that. And I'll add that. So I was sort of drawn in the story, but there was something still missing for me a little bit. And like going through it again a little bit, I think I got a lot of imagery, which was great, and so a lot of the place and what's happening, that something's up basically, but I'm missing a little bit of more character. Kind of, there's some character in there, like with the dialogue and the some of the descriptions, but what I'm looking for, especially when reading Slush, is strong characters that draw you in, that make you want to continue reading, like what's going to happen to this person. And that's something that I'm missing a little bit here. I would definitely still continue reading, but I'm waiting for something more to pop up.
Awesome. I think it's a strong start for sure. Let's move on to our next entry here. We have another short story. It is a sci-fi horror short story. titled Ransomware. She woke with 3 thoughts in mind. First, her bank account number. Second, the account password, a long one, lovingly selected to adhere to all modern security recommendations, Chartreuse, Lumpia, Agana Heights. Third, a missive, accompanied by a long overseas phone number. Call us. The 4th thought she had was, fuck. She'd been hacked. In bed, she groaned as the phone number throbbed in her brain. They'd gotten her good. Her ears were ringing. It hurt. It sounded like a dial tone. Maybe if she just called, then it would all... No, she thought, no. She took a breath, tried to gather herself. What was her name? God, if those fuckers took her name... But no, she needed her name to authenticate. And yes, there it was, Augustine Padilla Hall. Right? She closed her eyes, massaged her forehead, felt the smooth borders of her processor beneath her wrinkled brow, which was hot and humming with exertion. Yes, she was sure now. She was Augustine. August for short, though her mother had always used the whole thing, so heavy and unwieldy. Augustine. Augustine! Halike na parimarami tayo. Shit, she thought. I have no idea what that means. She gritted her teeth, like sheer draw strength could bring back her to fluency. Come on, anything. What about those phrases everyone's supposed to know in a language? Hello, how are you? Where's the bathroom? But she could only think of one thing. Okay, right before the last 2 sentences, we got all 3 hands in the air from our editors. Jason, you went last, so I want to know why.
Okay, so I had to comment that the story starts with someone waking up, so that automatically will cause Slush readers to squish their face and shake their head and be like, no, 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 no. But I was drawn in enough by the immediate conflict that was popping up to let me ride over that. The language throughout did not feel either techy enough or panicked enough for me, and I decided to give it a little bit of time to maybe reach that point, and by the time we got down to the bottom, I realized, okay, it's not happening, so up went the hand. Also, the opening starts with the declaration that she has 3 thoughts, when in reality she has 4, which kind of confused me as well. I was like, okay, it counts off a little bit. And the 4th one being a swear word, which is fine, but it's also kind of a passe way of showing a moment of stress at the very start of a story like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump in. I
Please.
agree with everything that Jason said. The moment that I mean that very first sentence is like she woke up, and I'm just like, okay, well, let's see if it goes somewhere, you know. There just wasn't anything like I wanted to be intrigued about this idea of we have a processor in our head and people can hack that, but the language wasn't... I want to use the word grippy. I don't know. That's the wrong word. But it just didn't hold my attention. Like, I felt like if we're in this world, like I think of where if you're in a world where you can have processors in your head to the point where people can hack it, I'm wanting like really juicy, like great cyberpunk language to go with that. And this just felt like picking up your phone and seeing that your account was hacked. Like I didn't feel like the language didn't excite me, and it didn't feel like this was a story that was going to show me something new. It feels like a story that all of us have read. And I think that some punchier language, some really cool, like, let's put this person squarely in like a sci-fi universe with some really great punchy language would have helped it. I still would start it differently, just because so many readers, the moment someone's just waking up, like, can it be done? Yes, but it has been done, like, a lot. So I would try to find a different way to start it, a different way to introduce this concept.
Definitely. Interesting. Kai.
Yeah, I agree with everything. The only thing I would add is we're so much in the character's head here, and that can work. That can be great, but we're constantly being pulled out of the story by some use of the words like thought, for example. That every time you mention she thought this, she thought that, that's a point where I, as a reader, just I'm feeling pulled out of the story. I'm no longer engaged with the actual thought. If we just have instead of mentioning her fourth thought, the fourth thought she had was fuck. It could just be fuck, and then like she'd been hacked. Personally, maybe even especially because we're in the character's head, I would maybe prefer a first person point of view. That might give it a different angle to work with. Completely up to the author here, but that's sort of maybe that would draw me in even more. And yeah, everything else has already been said. That
I would
I have nothing
recommend.
else to add.
Well, you did a good job with the recommendation. I completely agree. First person, I think, would draw some immediacy to it, and I think if you change the setting of this opening to make I really don't know. Is the character in bed? Are they daydreaming on the bus? I think if you narrow it down to type first person, have the person like in a crowded situation, and then they realize this terrible thing has happened, and like paranoia is a very common theme in stories like this. Maybe they have a reason to be paranoid of someone near them. You immediately draw attention, and you can also use the environment that they're in as a way of signifying, what kind of sci-fi story this is going to be.
I totally agree, and I think the like I said, we're just in the character's head here, and like if we had an actual scene, maybe as you said, in a crowded place, and instead of the character woke up, it's more like, okay, they had a blackout, and now who are they? What's happening? Like there's so much you can describe to
Yeah.
draw the reader in, which just isn't quite happening here.
That's a really good point. I think that you're absolutely right. First person would be awesome here, and first person would also give us an opportunity as a reader to know what her opinions are about things. Because I feel like as a reader right now, we're getting opinions through the swear words, but we're not necessarily getting an opinion about the processor, for example, or whether this has happened before or things like that. There might be more room for that if it's first person. Good
I
point.
do think the writer could pull off the rewrite. I do think the writing is really good from a technical standpoint. So it's just a matter of reworking what's there.
Definitely. And I also would like to apologize to the author for probably butchering Tagalog, but I tried. I'm sorry. All right, our third entry is another short story in the sci-fi category. And the title of this is Ascendant, Neither Nors. Rianne tread alone through the field of bobbing sunflower pods, their old humanoid has-suit overtight, dancing delicately through the tenuous gravity of the dying planet. They'd bloomed years ago, and yet they still felt too young to have seen their own world fall. so unlike watching another. Their ship sat whirring at the garden's edge, now stocked with the harvest's yield, likely the last generation their people would have. They touched and peered through the smooth plexiglass of each container they passed, before moving on, attentive for the signs. Midwifery did not suit Rian well, but the hands of a binary would have been worse. These flowers at least opened for Rian, recognized their genetic material. Neither and both, the petals parted, and neither and both, the leaves of Rian's hands received. Others had tried to help out of charity, but the vines of a marrow descendant, the cones of a pine seedling, the coarse fingers of a luffa bloom, failures all. At last they reached the end of the rows. In the final pod, their parent flower stood tall but wilting. The artificial breeze within had dwindled as the power cells died. There was no sibling to be gleaned, only ordinary seeds remaining. No reason to linger at this specific specimen as the timer on Rian's belt beeped for departure. And yet, Rian locked their gloves into the enclosure's ports and waited for the hiss of pressurization. Okay, so we had Kai maybe midway through, I think, and Jason right at the end. Lesley did not raise her hand. Kai, let's start with you.
Oh, I was dreading this. So, again, I'm missing a strong feeling for the character. I'm getting a lot of description of the area and sort of what's being done, and there's intrigue in that. I kind of want to know what else is going on. What's the point of all of this? But I'm also just I don't really have that. It's not enough for me to latch onto, and I want to know more, like more feelings from the character about what they're doing and what needs to be done, and um there was some of the phrasing where you were tripping over it a little bit as well, and I also just while reading it I was tripping over it as well, where I then just had the feeling that it's not these first 250 words. If I were reading Slush, I'd probably read them all the way and maybe a little bit further. But I also have had the feeling that this is probably not going to be as strong as what we're looking for usually.
Jason?
I completely agree there. What kept me reading was I was drawn to the weirdness of what the heck was this character doing, and I think it would have been better served to have kind of insinuated a little bit about what was going on, but not dedicate so much of this opening on that, because you do need to establish, a character to care about, and hopefully hint at some kind of conflict. And we're missing both of those aspects. And the reason I raised my hand at the very end is that is honestly probably when I would have given up on the story, because by this point I have neither of those. And the central weirdness with the technology of the sunflowers, and they were sunflowers, weren't they?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And how they opened up, that was some nice stuff. It just needed just a more solid ground, and also the language was very strained, and just like Kai and you, when you were reading it, I stumbled over some of the phrases and some of the word choices. They just felt kind of off.
Lesley?
This is a super ambitious concept, because if I'm understanding it correctly, our character is not a person, they're a plant, which I love that idea. Like, that's different. That's not something that I feel like I've seen a lot. Like, we've had plenty of stories where plant life of some form is kind of the antagonist, but to have a story where you flip that and the plant life is the protagonist, like I kind of am really digging that concept. I do agree that there are many phrases in here that it's just clunky, and I feel like the author has taken too long to kind of set up this idea that Rian is a plant and they're having to use a humanoid spacesuit to go out and kind of do this last harvest, I'm assuming before they're leaving this place. But it needs to happen. Like, you've got to put all of that in. Like, you've got to set up this very ambitious, weird concept. Like, absolutely, that has to happen in your story, or readers are not going to kind of get what you're trying to do. But at the same time, like Jason said, like, we need to have more of a grounded feeling of like, what is the conflict here? And like, who is this character beyond just going out? We know they're a midwife, or they're doing midwifery, but why are they having to leave? And if their parent is growing in the soil, why do they need to be in a spacesuit? Like, there's so many questions here that I feel could have been hinted with and answered with some stronger language, a little bit less clunky language. But I absolutely love this concept, and it's not something that I feel like I've seen a whole lot of. Like, a plant life being the protagonist is really neat, and I think if it's done correctly, could be super, super effective. So that's why I didn't raise my hand, even though I got the clunkiness and I knew that it needed more than what we are seeing. I love the concept, and I think it could be fantastic. So good job.
I agree. I think this is lovely, and I enjoy some of the turns of phrase in here. Reading them out loud feels nice, and then it, like you said, there are parts where it sort of converges and becomes a little heavyweight. So maybe this is a good time to give our general reminder to authors out there to read your stuff out loud, to yourself, to someone else, to your phone. Read it out loud, because someday a voiceover person or an audiobook narrator will thank you. Read it out loud. I also like the plant person concept, and I want to read more.
Yeah, that's
for what it's worth. Yeah.
We've seen quite a few where you have plants or mold or mushrooms or something as like the antagonist, the thing that we're battling against. But to flip that, I think that's super creative, and I like it. And it's not something I've seen overdone. Now we're going to get a ton of
you've done it, Lesley.
Stories, and Kai's going to be sending me nasty letters.
Kai's going to be like, "Why did you say that? Why?
No, I love plant characters. The very first story I sold was actually a plant character, so that's definitely something that's very cool. This one just didn't draw me in enough.
Yeah, I agree totally.
All right, my friends, we'll move on to our next entry. This is a novella length piece. Obviously, we're not reading the whole piece. We're reading the first 250 words. Don't panic. But it is a novella, and it is a sci-fi horror novella titled Ice Ivory. Stepan looks just like my dead son. In that same way, he scratches his left ear, stumbles out of his tent, wipes at mosquitoes. He thrusts his cast iron pan over the fire, kicking at the charred wood, and embers scamper like jumping fleas. In the twist of his foot, I see my son punting a soccer ball into a tree. My viewfinder laps it all up like it's thirsty, like it just wants more. Each click of the button an impatient whine. All right, all right. When Stepan walks, he lurches, as if the chilly air has stiffened his legs, as if he's much bigger than he realizes. And when he snorts his first smoke of the day, a puff of white air bursts out around his head like a concentrated explosion. I know it's not him. It couldn't be him. You'd tell me it's a coincidence, that I'm just seeing what I want to see, but none of me wants to see the jagged ends of his 3 fingers at the knuckle like they've been bitten off, just like my son's. I don't know if Stepan sees me, shooting him from the cliff's edge, I'd hate it if he'd catch me lingering too long on his face. This must be what voyeurs feel like, a constant pull and a fear that someone will catch you, all shackled and honest. I'm only 20 meters above his tent. I could spit, and seconds later he'd think rain was coming. Okay, we made it through with just Lesley's hand in the air. Lesley, tell me about your feelings.
I really, really like that first sentence, because obviously, I mean, that immediately puts the editor, like, we know that this main character has a dark past. Like, if any parent losing their child, that automatically is going to change who that person is. I really enjoyed that second paragraph where it's explaining how he moves and why the way he moves reminds him of the dead son. At the third, where it's like my viewfinder is laps it up like thirsty, I was like, ooh, wait, because I'm imagining you say son. My immediate thought went to a child, which then later on it doesn't seem like it's a child, and I was kind of like, oh, we don't take pictures of other people's children. I was like, that mom moment in me is going, don't do that.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And then after that, I just kind of lost, because in my head, I'm automatically thinking, are we going to find out that this person is a creepy person who wants to do bad things to step in? Which doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing, but that's where my expectation went. And from that point forward, I felt very confused of where this story was going to go. Like it said, like we have that this is a sci-fi horror novella. But there's nothing in what we have that's showing that, beyond that icky feeling I got of when you're taking pictures of someone and they don't know that you're taking pictures of them, which obviously alludes to horror that many of us, know about. But it was at that point after that, I started to feel confused about what is the author trying to make the reader feel, because it felt conflicting for me.
Makes sense. Kai?
So yeah, I'm a little bit torn. I think I would have probably just kept on reading a little bit more. And the thing is, there were so many, I felt drawn in to, there was, things were happening and there were questions. I had a lot of questions, and I was getting some answers, but not too many, like right away. And so I was very intrigued by who is this character who's watching Stepan, and who is Stepan really? Like, are they the dead son? But I also got some mixed signals, because there's this one paragraph where I'm starting to think that Stepan is a zombie, but I'm not sure if that's right or not, because when Stepan walks, he lurches. That word in itself, that's like a signal for, if you're reading horror, you might think it's zombies. And then also mentioning the bitten off fingers. That's sort of also, okay, seems like someone's injured, but also doesn't care about the injury. Of course, rereading it, I also thought, okay, maybe it's an old injury that the son had, and so this person obviously still is missing their fingers. But so I had these questions, and they were drawing me in. But if it turns out it's not a zombie, that sort of would already kind of lead to me being less interested in the story. And if it is a zombie, then it's also the question, okay, how's this going to continue? What's going to happen next? I'm getting from what Lesley said. I was thinking, okay, it's probably not a zombie, so then I probably wouldn't keep on reading that much longer. Considering that it's also a novella, I would give it more time for it to draw me in. If it's a short story, then I would maybe I'd maybe stop reading pretty soon if I find it in the slush pile.
Got it. Jason?
Okay. It's not often, but it happens once in a while. But with that, I don't agree with a lot of what Lesley said. I did not get any weird voyeur vibes of someone stalking or looking or
So you go out and
following.
take pictures of kids? Like that immediately sent me like, wait.
Right. Well,
I
And then
think
I
the
was
one.
very
I mean, if you
confused about like how
analyze,
old is Stepan?
yeah,
so if there's specificity, that might help sort of break up the.
Right. It's and I know that this is just one of those things where it's an assumption that I'm making as a reader. But as an author, you have to understand
but the kids
readers do make
lurch.
assumption.
Kids don't lurch. I mean, if you look at the language, I immediately read this person as older. Maybe
I agree
like
with that.
uh I mean, it could be his son or a doppelganger. We really don't know, which is
No,
one of
we
the
don't.
problems with the opening is not enough is told here in the first 250 to make much judgment. But I got the impression that this person is someone who may be intimidating or frightening uh, because they're a doppelganger, or they even could be a zombie. So I was kind of fascinated from that aspect. And I'm not saying that your interpretation, Lesley, is totally wrong. It could very well be that way. It's just that's not how it read to me. I do think that some work needs to be done to this opening to give it a more cohesive, targeted, all three of us agree what's going on kind of framework.
Yeah, I feel like we would need a little bit more specificity that says so that each of us would have a clear picture of what's going on, and yeah, the age, for example, of the because I also read it in a way where I was thinking, okay, this is a grown-up person now and not a child.
Right. Well, towards the end, it felt like, oh, it may be a grown up, but at that very beginning, where it's talking about the way that Stepan moves, and like how the kid kicks the ball, I was expecting a child, and then it kind of like flipped, and I was like, now I'm confused. What's going on here?
Definitely. So overall, we think that there could be potential here. We just need a little more specificity to start with, to set up sort of like what kind of expectation we might want to have going forward, whether it's a zombie story or whether it's something else going on. But I do kind of agree that there was some confusion in there. There was definitely tension. There's definitely some tension and some unease. I was uneasy, but
yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
There is some nice tension and unease going on. Why that is different, I think, for all three of us. So that's that's a
for
problem,
sure.
unfortunately.
Yes. All right, we'll move on to the next one. We have a short story. This is a fantasy short story. We're switching gears a little bit, not a ton, but a little bit. This is called The Short Malaise of CHS Room E305. I'd suspected the students had all turned when they came back from the seemingly interminable winter break. It wasn't anything specific, a subtle change in the eyes, maybe a darkening or a lightening. In some, the faintest hint of an elongated pupil. Dunbar's third hour turned last week. Now she teaches from a circle of salt in the corner. Jerry Tuck, the biology teacher and assistant girls basketball coach, told me in a furtive whisper, eyes dancing side to side. I frowned. His hair somehow always looked just in need of a cut, or for a few weeks' time to escape the awkward middle stages of being grown out. His shirts were either too tight or too loose. But that's an advanced class, I told him. Even I didn't know what it meant. There were no consistent predictors for who would turn, but if one turned, if one went feral, it wouldn't be long before the rest of the class was feral too. The next morning, after my first suspicion, the air hung thick in the classroom, humid, even though it had been a cold, dry winter, a winter of static shocks and split, cracked knuckles. But the students seemed to breathe more deeply, expend more of themselves when they breathed out, shimmering air crackling around me, menacing and hued red. We're going to be reading, I started, but the glowing eyes, not hunger, but disdain, absolute and unfettered, on every face stopped me. I stammered and then shut my mouth. Fun. Jason?
I was sold by the concept, not so much the writing. I maybe I'm not the target audience for this, but I do think it was and all the things that you need to do in your opening are accomplished here, and even though the writing didn't quite click for me, I would probably keep reading and see if I could get used to the voice and the tone. The only thing I didn't much like, and I think maybe this is what I'm pushing back against, is I don't know. It's labeled a fantasy, so I don't know if this is set in the past or some modern fantasy thing. So I hate being lukewarm about it because I didn't raise my hand, but there is lots of good going here. So
Awesome. Kai?
I'll say right from the get-go, considering that this school setting, I got a very strong like modern vibe, and so I was thinking like urban fantasy. Um, and with what I really liked was within the first, what do we have? 6, 7 words. We have the word where students had all turned. So I suspected the students had all turned. This is immediate indication for me. I was at first thinking zombies again, but then there's some more clues that sort of go towards like werewolves or something of the kind. And I like that the lack of an answer here. We're getting some of it, but not all of it. And so there's more of the suspense of, okay, what did they actually turn into? And that really drew me in. Usually I say, hey, I want more character. I want to know more about this person. But even though we have a teacher who is the protagonist here, that it doesn't feel like it's about them. It's about the students. It's the at least the beginning part here is like, okay, they are the threat. They are, so we're getting more more words that are focused on describing them and describing the conflict between teachers and students, and how the teachers don't feel safe. And so all of this drew me in and made me want to keep on reading and figure out, well, okay, what kind of monsters are they, and what's going to happen next. and so that really worked for me.
Lesley?
Overall, I really enjoyed this one. I love the ambiguity at this point of what exactly are these teachers facing, because like, you know, when you say turned, many times, especially people who read a lot of horror, are going to be zombies or werewolves or something like that. They've been turned. But then you have the detail of the teacher teaching in a ring of salt. So then I'm going, are they demons? Like, are they possessed? I really liked that. I liked the ambiguity, and I can't speak today. I liked how you've built this world where whatever is happening to the students is obviously something that everyone knows about. Like, this isn't some secret that only this one teacher knows about. Like, it seems to be commonplace. And I love this idea that these poor teachers, even when their students have turned into whatever it is that they're turning into, and that we know is not something good, because there's definitely this feeling of unease that the teacher has of working around them if they've turned, but they still have to go to work. Like, the teacher has to teach in a circle of salt. I like that. I love the description of the other teacher that's whispering the rumors of like, oh, Dunbar's third hour's turn. She's teaching in a ring of salt, and how they're describing about how his hair either like needs a cut or it needs to grow out for a couple more weeks, and his shirt's never fit right, because that really gave you a very clear idea of like who this other teacher is. We've all known a person who just, no matter what they do, there's always something that you're like doesn't quite fit. So I liked all of that. I would definitely keep reading this one, because the author has set it up in a way and left enough clues and built the world up just enough that I'm like, yeah, I want to know what's going on. I want to see, like, are these demon students? But you say it's fantasy again, because now we have the genre up here, and I'm going, but it feels like it might be leaning horror.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So, you know, that might somewhere down the line turn me off if this turns into a very soft fantasy rather than being something a little bit meatier.
I confess I was totally reading this also expecting more horror to evolve. So but yeah, so that actually also might turn me off of the story at some point if I realize, oh, it's just explaining the more like pulling us into this world where this is sort of the thing. But what I've also really enjoyed is there sometimes what you're looking for is a story that has something to say, that has some kind of social commentary. And this one is sort of I'm immediately thinking focus on teenage puberty and like children becoming something else, and the conflicts that arise between
Little
students and
monsters, you
teachers.
mean?
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, and that so I'm I'm drawn in, and I want to know like what's going to happen next, and what kind of what's the actual commentary going to be here.
Definitely. And I think it's really interesting. Lesley said earlier in the stream that titles are so important to, especially to short fiction, I think, because it can do a lot of that heavy lifting for the reader, right? It can bring the reader directly to the place where you want them to be if they read that title, and it has something about it that helps them get there. This title is so specific, and it down to the classroom. but it opens with talking about the students all had turned, and the teachers are gossiping about students in different classes. So I'm wondering if I really want to know, actually, like whether this protagonist teacher will have to end up like saving the whole school, or like is it literally just going to be the rest of the story, is it just going to be contained to classroom E305? Like what's different about E305, or whether it's going to be a much bigger like whole picture. So I think that that's very interesting. Yeah, I'd read more. I'm not an editor, but I'd read more. I think it's really interesting. I also think it's really interesting because the teachers are the good guys, we're assuming, right? And that the students are the bad guys. And when you're a teenager and you're reading fiction, the teachers are always the bad guys.
I just love this concept of these poor teachers in this threat, and they're like having to teach from circles of salt. Like, I mean, I think that you're talking about commentary, Kai. Like, that's the commentary I'm getting, is
teachers,
that teaching conditions suck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm now thinking, of course, also more present with COVID, that the children, any of them could be sick, and you don't know it, and the teachers are like, yeah, in their salt barrier, hoping that they won't get infected as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
good. I hadn't thought of that before, but that's a really good point. Yeah.
A lot of layers. We're moving on to our next entry. We have a little bit more specific now. It's a short story. It's weird/dark fantasy. Weird/dark fantasy. The title of this entry is Eternity and Blood. My entire family died again. My last living grandchild, aged 106, rests cold and rigid, sunken in her feather mattress. Both grandchildren wanted more children after their firstborns disappeared during the war, but couldn't have more, and my heart aches in despair. Holding a tallow candle and inhaling its acrid smoke, I climb the spiral staircase to one of my castle's 2 remaining towers. At the top, the tall, thin windows let in enough light despite the gray clouds outside. I blow out the candle and sit at the oak desk to write a eulogy. 200 years of portraits, painted on small wooden panels, line the tower's round and rough plastered walls. The oldest paintings are faded, but in the most recent, Caris wears a loose-fitting hauberk, the same she wore when leaving, despite my pleading she was too young to fight. 40 years ago. She didn't return. I had let no one leave the castle since. I finished the eulogy. I shall honor the dead with a new castle. It's time to hemorrhage myself another life, to start another family. I bleed from my fingers. The ink on my quill drowns in blood. I bleed from my whole body, saturating my long tunic. Blood soaks through my parchment and trickles along the desk's furrows. With metronome-like drips, the blood pools around my bare feet. It streams out of the drainage gullies and cascades down the outside of my decrepit Welsh tower. I pray I have enough blood. Okay, we all made it through. Lesley?
I have thoughts. I'm not sure that I would have kept reading much farther. I did the opening paragraph, my entire family died again. I found that very, very intriguing. I immediately was trying to figure out, like, if your last living grandchild is 106, how old are you?
Mm-hmm.
So that was definitely a thought. I thought that the author did a very good job of kind of putting us in place, with the like details like the tallow candle and the castle. But I kind of felt like we were a little bit bogged down with details. I did have a moment of pause where it says 200 years of portraits. And I'm wondering, like, last grandchild was 106, so you're only going 94. Like, how many generations back of portraits? Because you say 200 years of portraits, and that's many, many generations. But if your grandchild is 106, it just kind of felt like, does the math. I wanted to sit down and be like, how long are these people living? When are they having their children? Like, because that's how my brain works. It's like backwards math engineering to figure out if it's correct. So that made me pause. I do like this idea of this person is having to hemorrhage themselves to start another family. I like this idea that, they're talking about like the one person left, and after that, they wouldn't allow anybody else to leave the family. So that gives us information about how powerful they are within their family. But I just felt a little bogged down, and I'm not sure, unless things started moving a little bit quicker, I probably would have stopped reading pretty soon after that.
Jason.
So the part that I found interesting is the part that Lesley's describing at the very end. The way the character has to hemorrhage to create a new family. I kind of wish that story actually had opened with that aspect, because that's unusual. Otherwise, this feels like kind of a typical blood magic or vampire-esque kind of opening. It feels familiar. I'm not implying that it's, being ripped off. I'm just saying this kind of story feels familiar. The real element here that will interest an editor is the mechanism behind the hemorrhaging and the creation of new family. The stuff before that is okay. It does effectively create a mood, kind of melancholic tone that I thought was rather effective, but there's just not a lot of movement or anything really going on here in these first 250. By the time you read that last sentence, my arm was twitching to want to go up. So,
All right, Kai.
So I really like fantasy, dark fantasy. Personally, I really enjoyed this and would want to keep on reading. But I've been waiting to be able to say this line, as if I'm in the slush pile for Apex, I would probably stop around there, maybe read a little bit further. But I already have this feeling that we're getting a story here about this character and their family, and there's weird blood magic, vampirism, whatever going on. But what's the point? What is this story going to tell me as a reader that's going to make it last? That's going to, of course, I can't know it all the way because I don't know how long the story goes and what else is going to happen. But the feeling I'm getting from these first 250 words is this is going to be an interesting fantasy story that's going to tell a tale, but I don't think it's going to linger. I don't think it's going to make me want to reread it and just go have this certain apexy feeling where I keep on coming back to the story. And that's just from experience, the feeling I'm getting in these first 250 words. And that's why I think for Apex Slush, I probably wouldn't read a lot more. And for personally, I think I might give it a shot and read the whole thing. I would have to see.
Definitely. Yeah, I agree. Jason mentioned that there's like a tone to it. There's like a quality to the word choices that feels very texturally specific. And I'm curious why. Like, I'm curious what, like you said, where it's going to go, Kai, like what kind of blood magic this is and what happens when they build a new castle using their blood. Interesting. Interesting.
I'll also add, so yeah, I really liked some of these dark descriptions, and that I think that's what you're talking about there as well. And I feel like you could add a little bit more horror vibe to it. Describing, I think Jason mentioned that as well, describing more of what's happening with the, like, how are they hemorrhaging themselves, and go into some of the gritty details that might not be for everyone, but it could really draw some readers in as well and be like, oh yeah, that's gross and disgusting. But I want
Give
more
me
of it.
more.
But I need to know why.
Yeah.
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 Yeah,
sure.
with this crowd, you want visceral.
Yeah.
Definitely. Our next entry is a short story, science fiction. And the title is The Cull Dodger. The robots had ordered me to the untamed forests of northern Quebec, where the Cull Dodgers were hiding. My loathsome mission was to find the Cull Dodgers, strut my curves like I still danced, and ensnare them with a classic honeypot. Searching for them was miserable. I traipsed through forests with uneven ground while futilely fending off mosquitoes and large black flies. After days of this, my skin was raw from scratching insect bites, and my muscles were so tight they needed a steamroller to loosen them. I finally sat beside a river and bawled. "Hey there," a voice called from nearby pines. Startled, I turned toward the speaker. A smile started to form when I glimpsed the person. My dear nephew Justin. Immediately, however, my burgeoning smile faded. Justin was a Cull Dodger. I needed to lure him into being euthanized. While I had done this to other people so I'd avoid my own euthanization, I hadn't known them before the population caps. Justin, I had. Hell, I taught him to ride a bike. So why had the fucking robots selected me for this mission? They obviously knew Justin was there. How was I the best person to woo him? Was this a test? I put the questions aside and ran to hug him. Justin! I stopped when other people emerged from the trees with weapons aimed at me. Sorry, Aunt Gemma, he said. No one gets out this far without robot help. Okay, so Kai's hand went up, I'd say in the first third, maybe? Is that a rough estimate? Yeah,
Yep.
Kai, why'd we stop?
Mainly from the writing style that didn't work for me personally. So and as we went along, I noticed more things that just didn't quite work for me. We start the first paragraph by saying, like, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do, and this is what happened sort of along the way, and so then we get this the meet situation where they see Justin, and we have a this inner conflict that emerges, and the protagonist sort of runs right into the trap, even though they've realized that this isn't it's probably not a good idea. Sort of, we already have more information as a reader, and the way it was written, it didn't satisfy my my sort of disbelief in that the character would fall for this. They seemed like they knew what they were doing, and then they made a stupid decision anyway. That can totally work in a story. The way it was written, it didn't work for me.
Got it. Lesley?
I think that's a really good point, Kai. I almost feel like the first two paragraphs, like I really enjoyed that first paragraph, and then the second paragraph, I feel like it could really be tightened up and trimmed down some. Like I almost feel like there was like just too much of a description of how miserable they are, that could be shortened. And then I agree with you, Kai. It's like immediately our protagonist is like, wait, why would the robot send me out here? You know, is it a test? But they immediately are like, oh well, I'll just brush that aside and keep going. The setup of the story is intriguing to me. I but at the same time, I'm kind of like, I need that information about like, why are people being euthanized? Like I felt like there was an integral part to the why of this world that we're not getting. And I would need that why to come relatively quickly for me to keep reading from this point. Because if it's just like robots have taken over the world and they've just decided that they're only keeping so many humans alive, okay, but I need to kind of know that, like, or is this a, you know, our world can only have so many people to be able to keep going, so we have to, but like, what is the why are they euthanizing? And I just felt like that information would need to come pretty quickly for me to stay engaged without feeling like I don't understand why any of this is happening. Because if you're out in the, you know, the jungle, if these people can support themselves off of it, then what's it matter? Like, why are we going out to get them if it's not, if there's no negative consequence for that?
Jason?
Yeah, I was amused by the first paragraph and I actually feel like it's pretty darn good. Maybe some of the word choices could be tweaked a little bit. The second paragraph, yeah, I probably should have raised my hand, but I wanted to know why there were Cull Dodgers and why she was being sent out to honeypot and kill people. I think if the author changes tactics, starting with that second paragraph, to give us a little bit of information, then my impression of the rest of this opening may improve. I was kind of okay with her. She thinks she's clever and decides, okay, I'm going to roll with this. It's my nephew. Obviously, I can't honeypot him. I immediately thought, okay, she's fallen into a trap, but my brain didn't think, you know, she should be realizing this is a trap because honestly, we don't really know a whole lot about her other than her tone and the way she's narrating the piece. So I didn't get the impression that she's like a experienced hunter of people, you know. So there's a lot to like here. I just think you're focusing on the wrong parts right out of the gate.
I would also suggest a different title. That title doesn't do anything for your story. It doesn't give us any information. It doesn't set a tone. It's not giving us any information. So I would just, it's not wrong per se, but I think that you could have a stronger title that would service your story better.
That's a good
really
point.
good point. Yeah. I was gonna say that when I see these kinds of titles in the slush, I uh I often have a feeling this is probably going to be a no. Not not that these titles can't work. They can, the story itself can be really, really good. But often this kind of title is sort of like, okay, it's going to be about this one thing, and there's no emotional beat to, like, yeah, this is what the story's going to be about, or there's no real intrigue except for, okay, what do they mean by the Cull Dodger, and what's this going to be? But I'm missing. There's so much potential that you can have in a title, and this doesn't hit the mark there.
Right. It's
And
not
one other,
necessarily wrong, but
exactly,
it's just not. It's a missed opportunity, I guess. It's a missed
absolutely, yeah.
opportunity to set a tone, to give us some indication, to intrigue the reader before they even start. So that would be my only.
That's a good point. It kind of like it's a loose photograph instead of a photograph in a specific frame. Like
Right.
if you have something in a nice frame with texture and all of that, it enhances the image, right? But if it's just a photograph just laying out on the table, it's maybe not as interesting to look at.
Right.
Yeah, I'm gonna say, as a reader, I read this one several times, and reading it out loud just now for all of you was the first time that I had any indication of what Cull Dodger meant. I really just was like, these are words next to each other and I don't know what they are, so I'm going to keep going. And just now I was like, oh, okay, the Cull Dodger. Which is to say, again, that it's not necessarily wrong, it's correct. But I, as a reader, would love, like you said, more specificity, more information about why there's a cull and why there's people dodging it.
Right.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
There's one other thing I wanted to mention, because I said earlier that the style didn't work for me. One part here that specifically, if I read that, I immediately think, there's so many that you could do this so much better. And so one line here: startled, I turned towards the speaker. A smile started to form when I glimpsed the person. We have two sentences here that aren't giving us like giving the character sees their dear nephew Justin, but we have these two sentences where we're just saying, hearing speaker and person, that aren't giving us what the character is experiencing in that moment. And so just from a style perspective, I feel why don't I immediately see Justin, and
Right.
then an explanation, this is her nephew, and she smiles, and then immediately she notices, oh wait, he's a Cull Dodger. So that's sort of just too much, can't think of the way how to, but too much explaining around the thing instead of giving me the thing.
I call that a lack of economy of prose. I've written essays about this and thrown them up on the magazine's website. There's just an excess of words when several well-chosen words would function better and present a stronger image.
Absolutely. And I think if this format shows anything, it's how precious those first 250 words are, and how those words really have to do a lot to keep editors and readers engaged. So that's a really good point, Kai.
And I was okay with the title Cull Dodger. I wasn't blown away by it. But I do think that the phrase itself is evocative because it does raise a question, why are they culling? It's interesting terminology for calling someone who's trying to hide from you a dodger. Um, so tweak the title, but I kind of feel the Cull Dodger, the imagery with it, that's the way it's used in that opening paragraph is okay.
Oh, I absolutely agree, though, the way it's used in the opening paragraph, but I don't think that going in just based on the title, it doesn't give enough information about, because we don't know what the call is yet. So I felt like it just didn't add any tone because we aren't sure based on that alone what tone to expect.
Yeah, that's definitely possible missed opportunity, as you had said.
Okay. Our next entry is another short story. This one is science fiction, and the title is Wildlife Sanctuary. I lie alone in the fetid compost of the Yenian jungle, trying to focus on the velvety fungus that will soon coat my body in tufts of neon orange. I'm here. It's here, soft beneath my fingers. Mir calls it the quickness for the way it can dispose of even the planet's largest grazers within a matter of hours. Its scientific name is... what is it? If I can conjure up words, they might keep me tethered to this time and place, but taxonomical terms are the first to go. What does the fungus call itself? I'm crawling across a leaf. I'm inside of a flower. I'm in an air-conditioned classroom pod less than 1 Earth week ago, resenting my obligation to be there. It's Ecology Day, and I'm giving a presentation on the importance of Outer Colonial Endangered Species Act. It's vital to show that women can be wildlife rangers at this regressive outpost, so each year I'm paraded into the midst of glassy-eyed little sociopaths. Why are we not supposed to eat the lemuras? One rosy-cheeked child asks, when they're so delicious. A wave of giggles boils up around me while I tighten my smile, reminding myself they're just children, parroting their parents' tired jokes. We have to be particularly careful here, I reply, because in the absence of predators, these animals have evolved to have only 2 or 3 offspring in their lifetimes. Introducing an outside predator here, humans, can easily disrupt an entire ecosystem. So we have one hand up in the room from Jason Sizemore. What's up?
Oh, you want me to go first?
Yeah, what's up, Jason? Let's go.
Yeah, how's it going?
You
Hey.
raised your hand. You gotta. It's your turn.
Okay. I just was like, come on, let's get to it. I thought the first sentence was overwrought, a little try-hardy. I really did though like the direction the paragraph took. I'm here, it's here, soft beneath my fingers. Simple, evocative. Mir calls it the quickness for the way it can dispose of even the planet's largest grazers. There's a lot there that I like, but some of the descriptions just threw me out of the story immediately because it didn't flow too well. I'm crawling across the leaf. I'm inside of a flower. I think that's it's kind of misplaced because you have the protagonist thinking, oh my God, I can't remember the fungus name, and then they switch to where they're crawling and flower, and it's just all over the place. The tone here where protagonist is giving the presentation, and it just didn't work for me overall.
Lesley?
I would definitely keep reading beyond this. I kind of where Jason felt like that he didn't enjoy the crawling across the leaf. I'm inside a flower. To me, that invoked this sense of like they're losing touch with reality as this fungus is starting to consume them. Am a little. I think I would take that less than 1 Earth week ago, and I'd put that at the front of the sentence instead of I'm in the air-conditioned classroom pod, because it is mirroring the other 2 sentences above there, but it was a little bit jarring because I was like, wait a second, how are they now in a classroom when they were inside of a flower? So I think that I get the mirroring aspect of it. I see what you're doing there, but I think that you might lose readers at that spot because they're going to be like, is this happening? Is it not happening? Like, what's going on? Because you started to kind of lull us into this kind of wild, trippy, we've eaten the mushrooms aspect. I like that aspect, but you got to kind of give us like, don't yank it out from under us so quickly. Like if you just put that 1 week ago, at the beginning of the sentence, that lets us know like, okay, now we're going to go back and see how they got here. My biggest concern with this story is you're setting up a story where this person, we know they are being consumed by this neon fuzz. So in my mind, like it's saying that it can dispose of even the planet's largest grazers within a matter of hours, which means if you're disposed of, you're gone, which means you're dead pretty quick, right? So you're not giving us much of a chance to feel like this ranger is going to be able to either save themselves or be saved by somebody else. So you're then yanking us back in time, presumably to show us how they've gotten to this point, right? But if we ultimately know that they're going to die, like right from the onset, what's the point of the story? Like, because you're not giving us any sort of hope. Like if they're going to be dead, like if it disposes of largest grazers within a matter of hours, you're not giving us a very large window for them to, one, figure out a way out or to be saved. And please don't let the female ranger be saved. She needs to save herself. like if I got to the end and some man came and saved her, I'd be like, I'm done. Swoosh. So yeah, you're setting yourself up where immediately I'm kind of like, well, what's the point if we know she's dying? Because that's my biggest holdback. Now maybe this flips and you have it masterfully figured out in a way that she figures it out. But that's my reservation at this point in reading the story is you've set up such a narrow window. And now rather than dealing with that narrow window in the trippy mushroom world, you're yanking us back in time. And I'm like, time's ticking. She's being dissolved. So that's my reservation. Whoever wrote this, you might be out there going, yes, but I have exactly the way that it all works out. I hope you do, because I would definitely keep reading at this point. But that's my concern. Like if she just dies, then that you already told us right in the first paragraph that she's dying. So I don't see what the point of reading the entire story would be.
That's a really good point. And I think that I think Jason said that this is ambitious. This piece is ambitious. Maybe I'm making that up. Maybe I said that the piece is ambitious. I don't know. I'm putting words in your mouth, Jason. Jason Sizemore said, I feel like this is really exciting and ambitious. There's a lot of really cool ideas here with an alien outpost and a ranger and endangered species and fungus and the idea that time is losing its meaning for this ranger as she is being absorbed or what have you. And I desperately want to read the rest of the story. But Kai, please tell us your thoughts.
Yeah. First of all, I totally agree with everything Lesley said. And I was going to what I wanted to say was what really works for me and what really drew me in was the entire first paragraph and this I'm crawling across a leaf, I'm inside of a flower. That was like these one sentence paragraphs. I personally I love writing these myself. It's totally my jam. And also that sort of drew me in more, giving me this feeling of they're becoming part of the fungus. They're becoming part of the new ecosystem here. And but that's also where, okay, I want more of this. And then all of a sudden we're in the classroom less than one Earth week ago. And I get like, okay, yeah, what Lesley said, we want to figure out how they got there. But I also I want to know, like, okay, what else is happening to this person while they're being digested and becoming part of this fungus. So I totally get why Jason raised his hand when we got to that part. That was also a part where, like, okay, there's a clear change of pace here, and I don't quite know how to fix it. I think I would want more of the fungus first, and then maybe we can get into this other stuff. And what Lesley said with just changing the sentence structure around, saying, okay, 1 Earth week ago, this is what happened. And then definitely the question, okay, what's the point of the story? What's the ending going to be? Are they going to just die? Then what? I'm not going to invest 20 minutes, half an hour into reading the story. If it's a like flash fiction, I feel like there's a lot of potential for, like, sort of just giving you this vignette of becoming part of this world and being digested by this fungus, becoming part of the fungus. That I would love that story as a like really short thing. Maybe just a drabble, just 100 words of that would be awesome. But how are you going to make this whole story work and keep the reader engaged? That's difficult. I have some ideas of, like, maybe they're being digested by the fungus on purpose to for some reason to also then get out of it later, or to evolve. I don't know. There are possibilities, but the way it reads at the moment, I also get this feeling, well, yeah, they're dead. Why am I reading about what happened a week ago? So yeah, there's that. So maybe also, even though this first paragraph really draws me in, maybe the how to fix this in the story is actually start a week ago. This is how this is the world that they're dealing with, and the delicate ecosystem, and then at the end, yeah, they get eaten by the fungus. That could actually be an interesting story as well, in that order.
Yeah, I think we're all kind of reaching for the same thing, which is that there's a very compelling idea here, and a strong texture of being in the compost and the fuzz and all of that, that, like, if there's a tiny extra little hint of why in that first paragraph, we might have more success with time jumping. Even that, like, if we know that there's a why, because I really want to know why. I really want to know why the ranger is, like, succumbing to the fuzz. But if it's an accident and they're just going to die, then yeah, absolutely, that's not going to be very satisfying for a reader. But there's so many options. There's so many options. It's just very exciting. We are unfortunately at time. I was like gonna just keep going. I was just gonna keep reading. we've made it through a couple of these submissions, but we have not made it through them all. If we did not get to yours, we apologize and we thank you for submitting. You're very brave for submitting. And for those of you who we did get to, we hope that all of this has been helpful and interesting and useful. And if you did not submit this time, be sure to hang around Apex, subscribe to the magazine, get on the newsletter that I'm sure we have, and the Patreon. You can support Apex Magazine on the Patreon. And next time we do a Snap Judgment, you too could join the fine and storied club of people who we have shaken our heads at on stream. I have been given the signal that we are coming to a close here. So I will just remind everyone that there is a Kickstarter currently live. We're nodding, right? That's true. Okay, there's a Kickstarter currently live for the Robotic Ambitions Anthology, which will be edited by Jason and Lesley. We have funded this excellent Robotic Ambitions Anthology. So the anthology is definitely happening. Very exciting, super exciting time. But we are now working towards those stretch goals. If you go over to the link that I assume someone is putting in the description or the chat of the stream, you can check out where we're at with those stretch goals, what those stretch goals are, and how you can participate in making this thing come to life. The next stretch goal is $12,500. And the reward for that stretch goal is going to be having an additional story added to the anthology chosen from open submissions. So if you have something that is ambitious and robotic, perhaps both at once, you too can join us in supporting the anthology coming forward and submitting to it at an open call at a later date. How exciting. Very cool. You can follow us on Twitter at ApexMag. You can visit us online at apex-magazine.com. Check out the Apex Magazine podcast, which does a story a month. Very cool stuff. I'm particularly fond of it. And thank you for being here, for tuning in, for watching this in the after the ex post facto stream, if you will. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Lesley. And thank you, Kai. Kai, doing your debut on the Snap Judgment stream. Thank you so much for being here, all of you, and for your wisdom and your time and your knowledge. I believe that's everything. I hope it was helpful. I hope it was fun. I hope you enjoyed it. And as usual, I'm your host and narrator, Aly Grauer, and I hope we will see you all again at the next Snap Judgment.
Bye.